Welcome, everyone. I'm glad most of you are joining again for a Zoom event, but I know that a few of you are brand new, and I welcome you. At this time, I am going to mute everybody. If you have questions, you can use the chat feature at this point, and we'll get that taken care of. So I'm going to do this right now. And I'm going to unmute our speaker. Good idea, right? So for those of you who haven't met me, I'm Lois Bainan. I work with our Primetime Club, as does Terry Sutter, who is joining us today. We are so excited to bring you this particular presentation. I have attended a presentation done by our speaker today, and she does a wonderful job. And I thought, who couldn't use this topic right now? And basically, I want to tell you a little bit about our speaker. Her name is Kimberly Hein-Beardsley. She goes by Kim. She's a quality management and population health specialist who's been working for Quartz for 16 years. She earned her psychology degree at Coe College in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, so not too far away, and a marriage degree, a marriage and family therapy degree from Edgewood College. She is a licensed marriage and family therapist and certified health coach. So she certainly knows a lot about this subject and many others along this line. So as I've enjoyed her, at this point, I'd like to turn this over to Kim.
Great, thank you very much, Lois, and thank you everyone for joining today. Feel free to let me know in the chat if you're having any issues hearing me or anything like that, but I appreciate the invitation to come talk with you today. And I'm going to be talking about resilience, and I will probably pose some questions to the group, and I welcome your engagement through the chat feature. Since we are having to do this virtually over Zoom, it really does, the chat feature is a nice option to be able to have some back and forth dialogue and be able to, chime in with your thoughts and your comments as well. But definitely, I think, resilience in general, is an important topic as far as, what kind of things do we need to tap into to be able to navigate kind of challenging times that we go through. But I would definitely say that 2020 is, exceptionally challenging, as you all are aware. There's so much going on with the pandemic and everything else that's kind of going on right now. A very challenging time for many of us. And when I talk about resilience, it really does, the notion and some of the skills and tools that I'll be sharing today, they do apply to a lot of different scenarios, but I recognize, this is kind of my disclaimer, I recognize that there are different degrees of kind of severity of situations you might be going through. And so we sometimes have to tap into resilience just to make it through kind of short-term challenging times, but then it's a different level of things that we're going through if we've maybe experienced a significant loss or something traumatic or having a challenging chronic health condition. And so some of the concepts that I talk about on the surface might feel a little simplistic even, given the significance of a situation somebody might be going through. And I would say, it's really intended to be when the time is right. These are things that you can tap into that help you kind of pick yourself back up and keep moving forward. But I recognize that if it is something like a significant loss or a major disruption in life or a traumatic event, you may have to go through the very normal human process of just going through the stages of dealing with whatever is happening. So by no means do I expect that somebody can quickly suddenly shift gears and try to start moving forward when maybe they need to experience their grief right now. They need to go through all of those feelings and stages that are totally normal and totally appropriate. So keeping that in mind, that as I go through some of these common themes and tools and things that can be helpful, it really is, the timing has to do with when it's appropriate given the circumstances. So sometimes you'll be able to kick in with these things right away, and other times it's naturally going to take a little bit longer. So wanting to put that out there, that I'm definitely aware that it really depends on what the situation is. So first, I'm going to kind of define, what it means to be resilient. I'm going to pose a question to the group to kind of help share your thoughts on when you hear that term, and then look at all the different things that we are having to deal with at any given time. Many of us have multiple areas, multiple energy drainers, as I call them, just commitments, challenges, things like that. We have a lot going on in multiple areas, and even just recognizing that to begin with. And then I'll explore what are some kind of common actions that people who are resilient and good at being resilient, what are some of the common themes? What are things that they do or they show that seems to be effective? And then what are the different elements of resiliency? How can we kind of beef up our resiliency bank account, so to speak, so that when we do need to draw on that, we already know what are some of the things that work for us. What are our go-to things that help us when we do need to navigate those challenging times? So I invite you in the chat feature, and as Lois said, there's a little button either at the bottom or the top that says chat. It usually has a little chat bubble next to it. If you bring that up, you're able to, it should auto default to say the message will go to everyone, which is great because we can all benefit from folks' thoughts. When you hear the term resilient, what comes to mind for you? There is no right answer here. I'm just curious what that means to you. So I'll just pause for a moment just to see if anybody wants to chime in through the chat feature. What does it mean to you to be resilient? I'm not seeing anything come in through the chat, but I'll just share some thoughts that kind of come to mind for me. Similar to what the presentation title includes, where, bouncing back when life throws you a curveball, picking yourself back up when you've been knocked over. Yes, being able to respond to a situation in a positive way. Thank you, Pauline. Absolutely. How it's really, how are we able to, get to that point where we can put, one foot in front of the other to be able to move forward and not just be kind of stuck in the situation that we're in. And so you may have your own kind of definitions, and that's okay. But, just kind of keep that in mind. What does it mean to you when you think of that term being resilient? And so some common things that folks who have been shown to be able to manage being resilient pretty effectively are listed here, and I'm going to go through these each in turn. The first point is taking responsibility and owning the power of choice, recognizing that how we respond to situations really is up to us. And that can also include kind of the idea of making peace with what we can and can't control. There are a lot of things, especially external things, that we can't control. We'd maybe like to, I definitely would love to be able to control things sometimes with my spouse or my kids or things like that, or the traffic or whatnot, but ultimately I can't. What I can own is my behavior, my reactions, my attitude about things, and I can take responsibility for that. And I can choose, when I want to be able to shift into that more positive way of thinking, and when do I want to stay kind of stuck in maybe a more frustrated, negative place. I can choose my behavior. And so it can be very empowering. It can be kind of daunting also to say, wow, that's all on me. I'm having to take that responsibility. And yet recognizing that that's really all we do have that control over. I really can only own myself. And not to say that we're not triggered by external events or situations or people, but it's really, being able to own that choice, that it's up to me how I want to decide and respond. And again, along with that, it's not to say that we're supposed to just suddenly think ourselves happy really quick in a moment, when maybe we're not quite there yet. We are human, and it's okay to feel down, to feel frustrated, to be like, oh my gosh, why is this happening to me? It's okay to have those normal human responses. The difference is we can choose how long to stay in that space. And we probably all know folks who maybe kind of live in that more negative space, and we can decide for ourselves, okay, I'm going to experience it. I'm going to feel it right now. And then when the time is right, when it feels appropriate, then I'm going to be able to say, okay, now I want to shift gears. I want to focus more on the positive. And that also goes along with the second one here of trying to look at things from a sense of hope, optimism, potential, positivity. When I think about that notion of trying to think positively or have that sense of hope and optimism, it is not intended to be Pollyanna-ish thinking. It's not intended to be rose-colored glasses thinking. It's more along the lines of, I compare it to having a belief that there's a light at the end of the tunnel, even when we can't see that light, even when that light is no more than a pinprick. Even if we are in our darkest hour that we are, have experienced so far, can I still believe that things will get better? Can I still believe and have that faith and hope and positive, that optimism that with time, with resources, with, support from people, around me, I will be able to, take those steps forward, and that light at the end of the tunnel will get bigger and bigger. But depending, the length of that tunnel will be different depending on the circumstances that somebody's going through, but it's still trying to have that sense of hope and optimism that there still is that light at the end of the tunnel, as opposed to feeling like, nope, this is just it. I'm just stuck in this dark place and that's all there is to it. So trying to shift that outlook on things, that perspective. And like I said, that doesn't negate the realities. That doesn't have a Pollyanna-ish way of thinking. It's still honoring the significance or the severity of what we're going through, but it's our choice to try to shift into that more optimistic, hopeful attitude, or at least still having the belief and the faith that it will get better. We will be able to get there. And the third one here, is really recognizing that we do need those connections of other people in our life. Whether you have a whole group of people that you feel connected to, or you have just that one main person that anytime, day or night, if you need to reach out to them, they're going to be there for you, and you'll do the same for them. We really are creatures where we need that kind of connection, and feeling like we don't have to traverse everything on our own, that we can have people to reach out to, that if we are going through a more challenging time, we're going to have those folks in our life that can, be that shoulder for us to lean on if we need to, and help lift us back up, to help us take those initial steps forward if we need to. And that really means, having to proactively develop those meaningful connections and, really be intentional about doing that, but recognizing that we need that kind of connection. And the last action of resilient individuals is being able to not get stuck in the past. We can learn from the past. There's a lot that we can learn from, a lot of pearls or nuggets that we can glean from situations and experiences that we've had. But again, we can choose to say, I'm going to focus on what's happening right now in the present, what can I do in this moment, and what are my next steps towards the future? Where am I trying to get to? How can I start to think to move beyond what situation I'm going through? And again, I know I sound like a broken record, but the timing of when it feels right will depend upon the significance of what it is that you're going through. If it really is kind of a short-term event, you might be able to pick up and move on pretty quickly. But if you have gone through a significant loss, you need to, it's important that you give yourself that permission to be human and to feel the grief and all of those stages that you go through when you're going through a loss like that, and not put too much pressure on yourself to have to move on too quickly. And even with some of that, it's going to depend on the individual and the circumstances as well. But can we try not to get stuck in the past too much? So those are some overall elements of resilient individuals, but we're going to get into some of these things and other elements of resiliency a little bit more as I go on. But, as I mentioned earlier, just recognizing, before I get into each of these elements of resiliency, recognizing that at any given point in time, we have a lot that is going on that we can, kind of even just, be compassionate with ourselves about and honor. And so we may be struggling with relationships with other people, friends, family members, neighbors. There might be those kind of situations where it's just kind of an ongoing challenge, or maybe there are concerns about finances or the future or health or, self-care and taking care of ourselves. And we can be bombarded by the message of should, and I'm going to put the word should in quotation marks, where, oh, you should do this, you should do that. It can feel like an awful lot of pressure out there. And sometimes it can feel like we're not quite measuring up. We're always behind where we should be. And that can feel like a lot of pressure too. And so even just recognizing from the outset, as far as, how many balls are you trying to juggle in the air? How many things do you have that are pulling on your energy right now that might be making you feel a little depleted? And just kind of just being, gentle with ourselves and recognizing that, hey, I do have a lot going on. And so, no wonder I've maybe been feeling this way. No wonder, this has maybe been more of a challenging time. And especially right now, especially, specifically related to this pandemic and how long this has gone on so much longer than so many people were anticipating. And it's just really changed, the dynamics of the way we interact with people. And now we're going into the holiday season, and what is that going to look like? And many people have been feeling so isolated for quite some time. We've really had to shift gears and try to find other ways to connect with folks, reach out via Zoom or virtual things like that. But just kind of recognizing that if we are feeling a little depleted or struggling a little bit, it's understandable. It's no wonder, because of what we're going through this time right now, not to mention everything else that's kind of happening in our environment and socially and in our country. There's a lot going on right now. And so just kind of recognizing that and being gentle with ourselves about that. So now I'm going to go into some of the elements of resiliency. And these, you look at this list, and there is one specifically on here called self-care, but really all of these things are related to self-care. And you might be like, oh, well, that doesn't seem like a, kind of a groundbreaking new thing on how to tackle and be more resilient. And I'd say you're absolutely right. But how it ties in is, can we on a regular basis, develop habits and routines that keep us, feeling recharged and rejuvenated and make, keep us feeling like our bucket is full, so that when we are confronted with stressors or confronted with, unexpected traumas or tragedies or things like that, we either already have some of that positive stuff already to pull from, so we're not encountering it completely depleted already, or when the time is right to pick ourselves back up, we know what things work for us. We know these sorts of habits, behaviors, self-care routines, these are the kind of things that help me navigate, cope, get through, and start moving forward after I've dealt with a really challenging time. So that's what we're going to talk about as I go into these. And I already started talking about the energy management a little bit here when I started talking about all the different categories and things that can be pulling on your energy. So just, being mindful of that, kind of doing a little mental catalog at times to say, do I have a lot that's going on? Am I feeling like I'm already behind on things because I've got so many challenging areas? I'm I'm struggling with relationships, or there's all the to-do items in my environment now that I'm spending so much time at home, potentially more than was done in the past in some cases. I'm very aware of all of the to-do items in the environment, and, you know, am I feeling comfortably financially for the future? Am I feeling like I'm taking care of myself physically and mentally and emotionally? So calling out and kind of recognizing those things as well. Sleep is another big challenge, and I'll pose another question to folks if you want to use the chat in just a minute, but if anybody's ever dealt with, you know, sleep issues, whether it's one night or a chronic challenge, or, you know, if we remember back to, for those folks who've had kids, what it was like when they were really, really little, that bedtime routine, you stuck to that. It was kind of sacred, because if you missed your window of opportunity, your whole night might have been kind of out of whack a little bit. You know, we recognize that the importance of that kind of a bedtime routine was, for children, was to help them prepare for bed, to kind of wind down a little bit, so their body and their mind got used to, oh, okay, so, you know, when I have maybe this last snack and I go up and I have a bath and I get into my comfy pajamas and mom or dad maybe reads me a bedtime story, my mind starts to learn that this means I'm going to be getting ready for bed. Do we have our own routines and rituals as well? Or are we already feeling kind of chronically sleep deprived because we haven't figured out what really works for us? And so sometimes it's taking a look at, what is our own bedtime routine like? You know, are we able to dim the lights at a certain time or turn off our electronic devices? Do we like to read before bed, or journal, or do a meditation, or do a crossword puzzle, you know, take a bath or a hot shower, you know, drink some hot tea or something, preferably without caffeine if it's close to bedtime. Along those same lines, though, is even being, you know, cognizant of what kinds of food and beverages make it harder for us to fall asleep. Many folks are really sensitive to sugar and caffeines, and many of us have figured that out for ourselves so far, but it's really, you know, just kind of keeping that in mind. Like I often share the example that my brother could probably drink coffee, you know, 24/7 and still sleep just fine when he wants to. It doesn't seem to faze him. But my mom swears she cannot have more than a chocolate chip after like 2 or 3 p.m. or her entire sleep will be disrupted. I'm somewhere in the middle. I do like my dark chocolate, and so I have to be careful of the timing of when I eat that, because I definitely notice that I will have a more restless night if I have caffeine, even the little bit amount of caffeine and dark chocolate too late. And so just kind of even recognizing that, because sleep is so important. If we aren't getting sleep, everything feels more challenging. You know, our temper, our fuse is a little bit shorter if we're feeling more tired, because we might be more crabby. We might be, you know, not have the energy to do some of the other self-care things that we know can be, you know, helpful for us, whether it's just some movement or getting up and socializing or whatever that might look like. And so just recognizing how important sleep is, and what are we able to do on a regular basis to get into a good sleep routine? Knowing that when we are, you know, hit with the unexpected, kind of blindsided with things or going through challenging times, our sleep can definitely be disrupted. We might be up because we're worrying, having a hard time sleeping because, you know, our mind is just processing everything going on. And yet, you know, when the time is right, we know some of the things then that will help us try to get back into a good sleep routine. We can remind ourselves, you know what, maybe I do want to make sure that I'm spending some time journaling or listening to, you know, a grown-up bedtime story or a meditation, or just dimming the lights or turning the TV off, because we've already learned what works for us. And so when we need to be able to have help getting back into that sleep routine, we already know what are kind of our go-to things. And so I'm curious if anybody wants to share in the chat, and you're welcome to do this as I go along. Even if I've moved on, you're welcome to share things. If you already know, like if you have your kind of favorite bedtime ritual thing that really helps you, feel free to put it in the chat. I'm definitely a reader. Even if it's pretty late at night, I still like to spend maybe 20 minutes or so reading something, just to kind of, and I like to read with a physical book as opposed to a device, just because it kind of helps, take my mind off of things. I'm able just to kind of shift gears, and my body and mind has learned that, all right, this is my calming thing. So I often have a book with a little book lamp on my nightstand, so I don't have to keep my spouse up at night. But taking some time to read has been something really helpful for me. So if you want to share kind of your favorite bedtime routine or thing that helps you kind of unwind, feel free to put that in the chat. But I'm going to keep moving as we go through, but you are welcome to continue to add.
I wanted
One
to
other
just
thing,
mention,
oh yeah,
Kim,
yeah.
I just wanted to mention that if you have something you would like to share with Kim or myself, in the chat down below where it says to, and if it's showing everyone, if you use that little down arrow, there'll come up a list of names and you can select to share it with one of us, and then we can share it with the group if you're more comfortable.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for mentioning that, Lois. Yes, you don't have to share it with everyone. You can certainly share it with me or Lois, and we'll be sure to mention it as well. Absolutely. And so I talked a little bit about the social support already, but, being able to identify who are the folks that we feel like we can turn to and rely on when we are going through a challenging time. Our family members, our friends, what is it that we, who are our kind of our go-to people? And sometimes we have to really be intentional about cultivating those relationships as well, especially if we're not if we're still kind of social distancing or whatnot, if we haven't been able to physically get together as much as possible, can we pick up the phone and call? Can we say, hey, let's have a little Zoom meeting with just our friends? I've done that with some of my neighbor ladies, where we used to kind of get together socially, and now we're like, let's just have a little virtual Zoom, social hour, and we can just catch up with each other and be able to chat that way. And it's been a really kind of fun way just to feel like we can still stay in touch, or doing that with family members. I know texting and stuff is a big thing for a lot of folks right now, and that's a great way to reach out. But even, taking that extra step and actually making the phone call can really be a nice way to connect as well. And I definitely know I am guilty of this, where I'll have the thought will go through my head, oh, gee, I should reach out to this person. And then life just gets kind of busy, and it could be weeks, if not months, before the thought pops back into my head again. And so I have to be intentional. My brother, who now lives out in Colorado, if I'm not intentional about, every week or 2 weeks, if I haven't heard from him, and usually I'm probably the one who initiates the outreach, I'm like, I'm going to call him and just say, hey, do you just have time to chat just about whatever? I talk to my mom just about every single day, but really having to be intentional about that, because we often want to, we want other people to know that we're there for them, but it helps to know who are the people that we feel like we can turn to as well, because that we do need that connection to feel like we don't have to shoulder the burden of the challenges that we're going through on our own. Do we have people that we feel like we can reach out to? And if that is a challenging area, and it can be, absolutely, what are ways to be able to cultivate more of that support? Do we maybe need to kind of push our comfort zone a little bit to try to reach out or whatnot? But are there ways to, create more of that support group around us if we feel like we're struggling a little bit? And sometimes we can turn, and bounce those ideas off of other people as well, as far as, what do you do to kind of reach out? Some people are, much more comfortable with social media as a way to connect with like-minded folks, and other folks, it is more, groups like this, which is a phenomenal group to be able to connect with. You really do develop relationships with other people, or it might be through other service organizations or local, groups within town, or your churches or things like that. But it really does take, intention to say, okay, maybe I don't feel like connecting today, but I'm going to, because I really want to maintain those relationships and connections. I'm an old man now, and I've known a great many problems in my life, most of which never happened, by Mark Twain. I'm going to get into be talking a little bit about our attitude and our mindset. And I touched on this a little bit earlier when I was talking about the positivity piece, but it plays into just kind of our mindset, you know, the outlook that we look at life with, kind of the filter or the lens that we view life through. Are we more of a glass is half empty or a glass is half full kind of person? And even if we're maybe on the glass is half empty, you know, can we allow ourselves to feel that way, but then pick ourselves back up and try to shift intentionally, make that choice that, okay, and now I want to move into more positive thinking. And like I said, positive thinking is not intended to be rose-colored glasses or Pollyanna-ish. It's meant to be more hopeful, optimistic, comforting, supportive, not negating the realities of what's going through, not glossing over it, not minimizing it or making it think like you can just snap yourself into a good mood when you need to, but it's trying to have that outlook of better days are coming and there is that light at the end of the tunnel. And sometimes, you know, the way positive thinking can come into play, it can be the messages we're thinking about ourselves or even the messages we're thinking about situations. And so what is our self-talk like? How are we treating ourselves? You know, think about if we're beating ourselves up at all mentally, not everybody does this, but some of us do at times. If we're beating ourselves up, can we stop and challenge ourselves and say, would I ever actually say that to somebody else? Would I ever talk to somebody else the way I'm talking to myself? Would I ever berate them that way or call them names or make them feel bad or really make them feel like they completely, you know, messed up in a situation? And my hope is that, you know, we don't treat ourselves that way either. My hope is that we can truly love ourselves and be our biggest supporters, not in a, you know, arrogant, conceited way, but in a, you know, I do love myself way. I do respect myself. I do think I'm a good person. And so I want to treat myself well, you know, as well as I would treat other people that I love as well. You know, I want to be as, you know, kind, compassionate with myself as I would be with someone else. So sometimes it's challenging ourselves to be like, wow, if I'm beating myself up here mentally, would I say that to somebody else? Well, then I really don't want to treat myself that way either. And sometimes if we're struggling with, well, then what do I say to myself to try to make myself feel better? Well, what would you say to somebody else to build them back up? If you heard somebody else beating themselves up or really feeling down because something happened that didn't go their way and they just feel like they, you know, dropped the ball on something or whatnot, you know, what would you say to try to support and uplift them? And we're not looking for, oh, everything's great, everything's perfect, it's going to be just fine, because that's not realistic. It's more of the, hey, you know what, it's going to be okay. This too shall pass. You know, just take it one step at a time. You know, we can talk through what do you think needs to be done to maybe, you know, remedy the situation or be able to move on from it or apologize if you need to, but it's going to be okay. And so being able to be gentle and compassionate with ourselves as far as the kind of messaging that we're giving ourselves. So I encourage you to kind of think about what your self-talk looks like. The next piece I'm going to talk about is looking at our priorities in life. And, you know, are we living our life in congruence with what we feel, you know, is important to us? And that can mean, you know, sometimes taking a look at the different categories of our life and really see how happy or satisfied we are with them. And so oftentimes I have like a little a wheel or a handout that I will share in person with folks that kind of goes through this. But if we're feeling like we're putting a lot of time or energy into areas that aren't really where we want to put them, or if we feel like we've neglected things that are important to us because we've been caught up in whatever, you know, kind of crisis or situation we're going through, we may really start to feel out of balance that way if things that are important have really been put on the back burner. And so I often encourage folks, kind of go through a list like this. You might have different categories that you would identify, but these are some common ones. And almost, like on a scale of 1 to 10 for each of them, with 1 being completely unhappy and miserable with that area, and 10 being everything's perfect, everything's great. How would you rate your level of satisfaction with these areas, with your contact with or relationships with friends and family, how you're feeling about your physical health, whether it's, nutrition or physical activity, or how you're feeling about sleep or managing your stress, or, being able to volunteer and be of service to others, or being able to just have fun and socialize and have some play in your life, or how you're feeling about, your financial stability and where things are going, or kind of where you feel, just your purpose now, your legacy, where things are at that way, your connection to your faith or your spirituality, whatever that might look like for you. And so going through these areas can be really interesting. It's, if you do go through and you rate them on a scale of like 1 to 10 or 1 to 5, whatever works best for you, it can be kind of a nice little way to take like a temperature or a snapshot of this moment in time. This is what I feel is going really well, and these are areas that I'm just not as happy in. And are there any of those areas that you feel like, I've really gotten away from, finding ways to be able to volunteer. It's just, I haven't felt like I've been able to do that during this pandemic, but it's always been something that's been important to me, and I really can just feel it, mentally and emotionally, that I'm missing that opportunity to be of service. Maybe I do want to explore what can I do in a safe way to still be of service and feel like I'm able to give back or whatnot. And so it can be an opportunity to go through a list like this and say, if I made a little bit of movement in some area that I'm feeling dissatisfied in, how would that help me feel? Would it help fill up my emotional bucket a little bit more to feel like I am taking care of myself? I am feeling good about my connections and where things are going. Because so often when we're in the middle of stressful times, we can be so mobilized to just deal with what's right in front of us that some of these important areas can get put by the wayside. And yet, maybe that's what you're needing right there in that moment. Maybe, even in the midst of your responsibilities with whatever you're going through, finding time for something else to be able to help build yourself up is just as important as well. I might be getting ahead of myself in the slides here, but it brings to mind the idea of the oxygen mask on an airplane, where they say, put it on yourself first before you help the person next to you. Because if you're passed out or running on fumes, you're not going to be as effective as you would be if you were, fully functioning. And so it's kind of a similar thing where even if you're going through a really challenging, stressful time that does take a lot of your energy, if you know that, hey, you know what, I still need half an hour a week to do my favorite craft project, just to have something to focus on for myself, or I need to get out and go for a walk, or I just need to be able to read a book for a few minutes, or I need to be able to just have a phone call and laugh with someone for a few minutes, because that helps me recharge my batteries so that I can be fully engaged in confronting and dealing with the challenge that I'm going through. Giving yourself permission to do that those kind of things aren't, some people can feel like, oh, but now is not the time for me to be thinking about myself. I should be focusing, all my energy on taking care of this other person or the situation. And yet, there's a reason why they offer respite services for, caregivers and things like that. We do need that time to recharge our own batteries, so then we are that much more effective and productive and fully engaged in what we need to be. And so and sometimes that can be kind of a mental shift to give ourselves that permission and to not have that feel selfish or self-centered or anything like that, but just honoring that I'm not going to be as helpful to whatever situation I'm trying to help if I'm completely running on empty. If I'm tapped out and running on fumes, they're not going to be getting the good stuff from me. So better that I'm able to take a few minutes to myself on a regular basis to refill my own bucket, because then those folks will get the good stuff from me. So something to think about there a little bit as well. And some of that goes along with, finding out what works for you as far as managing stress. And I'm curious, feel free again to put in the chat either to everyone or to myself personally or to Lois if you want to, if you have a go-to thing that works for you to manage your stress. These are just some examples on this slide here. There are a lot of things that aren't listed here as well. For some folks, some sort of physical movement, whether it is like a yoga or a Tai Chi, they really enjoy. It may be going for a walk. It may be just, being able to do whatever you can within, within the abilities that you have to be able to just move your body a little bit. For others, it might be doing some sort of a meditation or a prayer or slowing down their breathing or being with their pet. It's been shown that petting an animal can lower your blood pressure. And so, for many people, it's like, I just need to spend some, because it's unconditional love from that animal. I just need to spend some time with them because that really just helps me feel grounded and feel like I can feel some of my stress going away, or listening to some music, or watching a favorite feel-good movie, or it might be doing a favorite craft project. It might be, if you really enjoy cooking, it might be going through the motions of preparing a meal. It's really activities for relaxation or stress relief. It's things that help you kind of calm down the chatter in the mind, not worrying about the future, not kind of get stuck dwelling in the past, but allowing yourself to just really be in that moment with whatever activity that is, whether it is physical activity or just doing something mentally, like even reading or meditating or doing a craft project, whatever that might look like. But it's an opportunity that allows you to just be in that moment. I've definitely, talked to people where they're like, I can sit out in the woods. I can get into that way when I'm fishing, I'm sitting out on my boat, or, whatever it might be. It's not maybe classic meditation that sometimes you think of, but you can get into that calming kind of meditative space just by doing an activity that allows you to be just present in that moment and to calm things down. And so I often encourage folks, if you don't already have a go-to thing, play around with different things and find what works for you. And again, give yourself permission to, make this a priority as well. Giving ourselves permission to say, it is important for me to slow down and be in the present moment so that I can recharge my battery. So if you want to, if anybody wants to share their what works for them for managing stress in the chat, I would definitely love to see that as well. Skip there one. Again, I think I said in the beginning, many of these really fall under the self-care umbrella, excuse me. But again, kind of what I was talking about on the life priority slide a little bit, where very often if we are going through a challenging time, sometimes our healthy habits are the things that kind of get put to the wayside, whether we're suddenly, and I am so guilty of this, suddenly not eating as healthy and just turning to comfort foods or quick, convenient foods, or I'm too exhausted and too tired to get up and do any kind of exercise, or I feel like I just have to keep pushing to get through things, and I'm not taking the breaks to recharge my batteries when I need to. And so kind of recognizing, self-care is really important. It is putting that oxygen mask on ourselves first. And so giving ourselves, again, that permission to maintain the healthy habits and the things that we know help us feel fully functioning so that we can be completely engaged in whatever it is that we're trying to navigate. Another one that sometimes involves giving ourselves permission is giving ourselves permission to find the humor in things, maybe not take everything so seriously, or even just give ourselves a moment of lightness in the middle of a challenging time. And there are ways to do this tactfully. There are ways to be able to say, I am fully aware about, what I'm aware of the severity or the significance of the situation I'm going through, but I just needed to watch a silly movie just for a little mini mental escape, so then I could regroup and come back and focus. I'm fully aware of the reality of what's going on, but I needed to laugh. I needed that moment of lightness. I needed just to say, I still need some light and fun in my life to recharge my batteries. And I can do that in a way that doesn't have to be disrespectful to what it is I'm going through. And I know that can feel hard sometimes. It can feel hard to, just be able to kind of break that ice a little bit with, the expectation of, but, we have to be so serious. Suddenly, a quote from Steel Magnolias pops into my head. Laughter through tears is my favorite emotion. I think that was Truvy, Dolly Parton's character, who said that. I just love that movie. I still watch it whenever it's on. But giving ourselves that permission that if we need to be able to, have a moment of lightness just to break up the heaviness of what it is that we're going through, we can do that. It's not like we're trying to ignore the reality of the situation. We're giving ourselves a little bit of respite from it. So there's a question that came in: if I wanted to learn about meditation or guided imagery, where would I go? There's a lot of great, if you use a lot of technology and you're into the internet or smartphones or things, there are some wonderful apps that are available. The Calm app is a wonderful one. It's called Calm, C-A-L-M. They have a great free version where they have a lot of different types of meditations. Insight Timer is another excellent app. You can try out, there's different topics, areas of focus, lengths of meditations, different people, so you can get used to if you like somebody's style or if you don't like their style. If you happen to be a Quartz member, we have an app that we've collaborated with called My Strength, which has information on stress, anxiety, depression, meditation, and mindfulness. There's information about that as well, but there's a lot of great things out there that you can test out free versions to see what really kind of fits for you. And for some people, it's, they'll find something that really works for them, and sometimes folks might say, it's still not my cup of tea, but I always encourage people, try something new because it might surprise you. So feel free, if you want more details about any of these apps or things that I mentioned, I can always connect, and I can include some links and things as well if folks are wanting more information. So I kind of challenge you, we're getting to the end here, and then I'll open it up for some additional questions. But, when you think about all of these different elements of resiliency, which really are the self-care, they really are identifying what works for you, recognizing and calling out things that might be draining your energy, thinking about, how you're doing with important areas. Are you living your life in congruence with things that you feel are important for you? How are you doing with your sleep and connecting with other people and trying to have that light at the end of a tunnel mentality, again, when the time is right? We're not trying to shift unrealistically into a positive state of mind if we're going through something challenging, but it's still trying to have that sense of hope, of optimism, that there is still good out there and it will be coming kind of feeling. I encourage you to think about, if there are things, are there things that you feel like you could do to enhance your resiliency, kind of incorporate into your routine on a regular basis so that this is what helps me kind of navigate through these challenging times. And I would definitely love it if anybody wants to share in the chat feature, what has been helping you, especially if we want to use like this pandemic, the last 7-8 months as an example. What has been helping you to be able to, cope during this time? What have you found has helped you be able to navigate this? And I would be happy to share some of that if you put something in the chat. Again, you can do it directly to me individually or to Lois if you don't want to put it out there for everyone, but feel free to type it to everyone as well, whatever works for you. So I'll open that question, if you want to share what's been helping you, but I also want to see if there are any other questions as well. These are just some tools in here that I have specific for Quartz members if you happen to be a Quartz member. So I won't sit on this for too long, but if anybody is a member and they want more information, I can certainly share them after the fact. And yes, feel free to unmute folks so you can readily chime in if you've got questions, absolutely. Or if there are other things that you want to share, feel free to verbally do that as well.
Oh, I have just unmuted everybody, so if you would prefer to ask a question, feel free. Does anybody want to share anything that?
Lois, this is
Yeah.
Mary Jo Aker, Lois.
Yes.
Okay, I know I told you this once, but when the pandemic started, I like to talk a lot. And one thing I started doing, I know a lot of older people, and I started making a list of every time I thought of this person or that person, I would just put their name down on my list. And then every day I would make sure that I called someone that made me feel better, and hopefully it made them feel better too. It was just something that worked for me.
Great idea.
Yes, thank you for sharing that.
You're welcome.
I think I need to do that since I tend to forget about it. With other stuff getting in the way, I need to start making that list of people that I want to reach out to.
That's the trick, is making a list. I found out for me anyway.
Yes.
Or even sending a card.
Yep, that's a good thing. Yep.
There are still things we can do.
Well, Lois,
Yes.
I haven't done anything to help my resiliency, but I will now.
Oh, awesome. That makes this all worthwhile, Sharon.
Yeah.
Lois and Kim, I'd like to know more about the Quartz and the Calm apps.
Yeah.
Oh,
Me
sure.
too.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. The Calm app is a free app that's out there. They do have a paid version.
Oh, shoot. Sorry, Kim. Kim, no.
I'll unmute.
Lois been playing with the buttons.
I am. I wanted to make
That's
it
okay.
feedback and I muted.
Yeah, I can hear the feedback a little bit. So if you need to mute everyone, I can unmute myself specifically if you want to.
Let's do that.
No.
Okay. Okay, I unmuted myself here. So yeah, the one app is called Calm, and that's just out on the internet or out on your in your app store if you happen to have a smartphone. And they have a lot of great tools and meditations and and lots of different topics for meditations. And the one specifically to Quartz, it's called My Strength. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to exit out of my, if I can, I'm going to exit out of my presentation quick, and I'm going to pull up that website for My Strength so you can see what it looks like. And obviously this would be different than what you might find, if you're using your phone app, but it's very similar. And you can skip it. It pops up with this every single day I log in. You can skip this at the bottom. But the My Strength app is something that's free for Quartz members, and they have topics on all of these areas: depression, things specific to coping during the pandemic, anxiety, stress, meditation, mindfulness, balancing intense emotions. They've got some stuff for people with young families, sleep, trauma, chronic pain, and then more things related to alcohol, substance use, things like that. People can then also then just search for a specific topic if they wanted to. But within this, they have, there are different, like, there's tools that you can do. You can create goals. You can click on these activities like meditation or mindfulness, and then they have, you can walk through kind of a quick little meditation, like a 1 minute or a 5 minute. It gives some great different tools and techniques, some background information on the concepts, but then also things to be able to practice. And, even, turning off autopilot, slowing down, forgiveness, self-esteem, compassion, grief. So there's a lot of great stuff out here. And so we were really excited to be able to partner with the My Strength app to be able to offer this for Quartz members, because given all of these topics, there's kind of something for everybody to really be able to kind of play around with. And so I can certainly send Lois a flyer about this, a handout, if you want me to share that, because this is available for Quartz members. I didn't send too many of them because I wasn't sure how many folks on the program would be Quartz members specifically, but I will go ahead and share that so you have more information about how do you sign up, because you can sign up either to get onto the website. So you don't have to have a smartphone, you can just use it online like this, or if you want to have it handy on your phone, you can do it that way as well. But then the other ones that I had mentioned outside of the My Strength one is that the Calm app and Insight Timer is another one. That those are just ones I also happen to like to use that are available, just to the public through your phone app store, because I like it because you can really pick what you're looking for. The length of time, the topics, the type of meditations, you can really play around with it and find your favorites, which ones you like, or which people facilitating the meditation that you really like, or which ones you really don't enjoy their style. And so it's kind of nice to be able to play around with that. So I'm happy to share that information as a follow-up with Lois, just so you have those if you're wanting to kind of play around with it a little bit more.
That's wonderful, Kim. And I think the other thing they might want to know is, even with, we weren't raised in the generation where you go to your phone and you look up, we're getting better at it, but where you look up anything you want to know more about. And really there's yoga out there online, there's Tai Chi. Do we have to be worried, do you feel, about getting into a site that's not a good site when we're searching for those kinds of things?
Most of the ones that would come up kind of in the top of the list are going to be some credible ones. And even with those, I'm happy to send some resources or links to you as well. It can be an unknown where you're just like, I don't know what rabbit hole I'm going to go down if I start clicking on this, and if it's going to get me someplace that isn't credible, isn't good to utilize. Sometimes I'll go to credible sites that maybe will then link to these other resources, like even some of the main healthcare systems like UW Health, or even other ones like WebMD or Mayo Clinic, the Cleveland Clinic. Some of these big respected medical sites, they may then have some, links embedded in there that you're like, okay, that they've already done the work of knowing that this is a good, credible place. So I think I can trust what they're recommending. And so that's I'll often try to search for some of those ones. Does this look like an organization that I've heard of before? And if they're endorsing it, then chances are this is going to be a safe place for me to look. Yeah.
Does anybody else have questions on anything that Kim touched on? Because I think we can all recognize that a lot of these ideas are new to us. We were never told we should take care of ourselves when we were younger, necessarily, like our kids have been. And so sometimes we have to teach ourselves some new tricks. And And so if you have any questions, Kim is a great resource. Okay.
Absolutely. Feel free to reach out to Lois if you have any follow-up questions. She can give you my contact directly, or she can pass them on to me. I'm definitely available for any follow-up.
Wonderful. Well,
Thank you so much for inviting me to present today. I really appreciate folks joining in, and I was really happy to be able to provide this for you.
well, thank you, Kim. You did a great job, and thank you to all of our primetime members for joining us and being open to the Zoom feature and just to this topic, just to recognize that this is something that maybe we can all learn from and look at for our lives to make them better in this horrible time. You know, it's a hard time for everybody. So thank you for coming. And again, thank you, Kim, for presenting for us today.
Absolutely. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you.